G'day there, welcome to the final week ahead video of 2021. Today I'm going to have a look at the S&P and the ASX because we had the futures and options expiry just on Friday last week in the US, and that's often a time you really do have to be wary of, because after the options and futures roll off, which is meaning they expire, the market can often have reversals around that time. So you've just got to be a bit careful, because the dealers are often in the market creating volatility leading into the expiry in the few days before expiry happens. So that can see some wild moves as the options expiry happens. And once it's out of the way, all of that option gamma rolls off and the market can be free to move again. And sometimes, especially around this Christmas period, once the liquidity rolls off and the options have expired, all of a sudden the market can sell off quite quickly. So you do have to be a little wary around that period. So I just want to show you the setup and how I see things, so you can watch it over this next few weeks while you're drinking beer and watching the cricket. So just looking at the S&P, the first thing I want you to notice is, of course, the massive uptrend we're in. This is a weekly trend I'm showing you. So we've got the 10-week exponential holding well above that 20-week simple. So that trend has been steady as a rock for a long time. And it's not over yet, even though we are seeing sort of a sideways performance for the last few months. And definitely momentum is waning here. But it's not over yet, is it, that weekly trend? We haven't seen that 10-week cross the 20-week simple, which is what we need to see to say we've got to be very careful that the trend may be shifting. So that's the first thing to point out. The second thing I want you to notice is we've got the weekly buy pivot that occurred just a few weeks ago, and that is still in place. So we had a bit of volatility. We had a couple of weeks of selling with the Omicron scare initially. Then we've had very strong buying all the way back to the highs, and that caused the weekly buy pivot. So you can see here with that close on that week above the high of that lowest price candle, that created the weekly buy pivot. So from that point of view, where it's trading now is actually where buying pressure should come in. And then things can head off to the upside again. So purely from that point of view, even though we've opened Monday quite weak in the US futures after that options expiry, just purely technically, you'd be expecting to see buying pressure come in around here due to that weekly buy pivot. Now, if that doesn't happen, and this is where I'm saying you need to keep an eye on how this market moves after that option expiry is out of the way. If this big strong buying pressure we saw was just options related, where people need to hedge their positions as we approach expiry, because gamma goes through the roof as you approach expiry. And if you don't understand what that means, you could go and Google it. I don't have time to cover it right now. But so the buying we saw could have been a bit of a furphy. And we've seen just a retest of that high. So if we don't see the buying pressure that you'd expect to see based on that weekly buy pivot around here, and things continue down over the next few days, that's when warning bells really start to go off. So for me, because we have the weekly buy pivot, I'm wary that the upside's still there and that the weekly trend is still up. So I'm allowing the market to, turn back up here. But now that we've seen a bit of volatility over this last month, if things turn back down rapidly and we see the S&P heading below that low of the move a few weeks ago, it could turn pretty ugly pretty quickly, because we're in this Christmas period. Liquidity is really low. Options expiry is out of the way. If it's been held up due to the options expiry and year-end window dressing, all of a sudden, it could actually come off quite rapidly. So I'm just wary of that. And the level in the S&P is 44.92. So, we're still about 100 points away from that in the S&P in the futures. But heading into the end of the year, the next few weeks, while I won't be doing these videos, if you do see the S&P cracking below that level, you do have to be wary because it could actually sell off quite rapidly. And the other thing I want you to note is if we just look at the way prices have moved over this past period, and I look at the range where we've had this intense move to the upside, we had a correction back in September, and then we've shot off to the upside, but where did prices get to? They got to that level, the 618, outside the range, and that's where you often get the selling pressure coming in. And we've seen that twice. It's been very stiff resistance, that level 618 above this initial range that got created in September. So that's just saying, okay, this is setting up quite well for some sort of distribution to take shape, that sort of thing. And even though it could end up heading higher, we could be in for a bit of a volatile period. And we've got the initial setup there with the selling pressure coming in at that point where you'd expect to see it. That's where I'm saying, heading back below 4,500, you're then re-entering that range. You'd have a target back to the point of control, which is around 4,400. So that'd be a first port of call. And it could rotate all the way down the other side as well. So that would head down to around 4,000 would be a possible target, being the level 618 below the range. So that would be the same distance there from the top of the range to that level and from the bottom of the range to that level. So you often get a lot of symmetry. So just looking at this setup, it is saying, it's all positive and fine. And as long as it holds above 4,500, this thing can turn back up and look brilliant because we do have the weekly buy pivot in place. So, I'm not saying it's time to sell now or any reason to panic at all. But with the options and futures rolling off and opening the week quite weak in the overnight market, I'm just interested to see how things trade. And below 4,500, I think there could be stronger selling pressure coming out of the woodwork. So you'd want to keep an eye on that. I've chatted for quite a while doing that, so no need to take up too much of your time. Just looking, finishing up with the ASX 200. We've seen this many times if you've been watching these videos. The fact that we have the old high from 2020, which is very important. We've already got the monthly sell pivot in place. We're seeing selling pressure where I'd expect to see it based on that monthly sell pivot and rolling over and just getting to a point where it starts to you have to be a bit wary because if the selling continues and the tripwire goes off below that 10-month exponential moving average and below the 2020 high, all of a sudden it can have a rapid move of mean reversion after this very strong rally that we've seen, and 6 months of treading water that we've seen, which is pretty usual for topping formations. Lots of buying's happened above there, but really it hasn't moved the market very far, and there's been lots of profit taking going on. So if prices crack below 7,000, a lot of that buying pressure there would probably hit the sell button in panic, and that could just get things going to the downside, creating the false break of that 2020 high. So just the setup is one I'm a little bit wary of, which is why I've taken a few profits and happy to just sit back and enjoy the Christmas break without stressing out too much about what's going on. And I am seeing quite a bit of profit taking across the board in that small and mid-cap space. All right, well, that's enough for now. Hope you have a great Christmas, and I will come back with more of these videos next year. And yeah, I'll chat to you then. Cheers.